Well, just in the last hour, Israel's Prime Minister has claimed the country is at the stage of decisive victory. In a brief message from the IDF's Gaza division, Benjamin Netanyahu said he had now approved plans to take control of Gaza City. As that operation began to take effect, there were heavy bombardments on Gaza City overnight and on other areas of the Strip by Israel's military, before that meeting between Mr. Netanyahu and his top ministers took place. Israeli troops are already operating in Zeitoun and the Jabaliya refugee camp to prepare the groundwork for the expanded operation, which could begin within days. Israeli forces have also increased shelling of the Sabra and Tufa neighborhoods. Thousands of Palestinians have left their homes, some for shelters along the coast, while others have moved to central and southern parts of the Strip. Across Gaza, one thing is clear. Israel's military operation is relentless. Now, as Gaza City's 1 million people brace for a new ground offensive, those who've already fled in search of safety fear even greater catastrophe may be imminent. Witnesses said the IDF struck the Al-Munassara camp in Deir al-Balah 3 times today. Some 70 families already living in makeshift homes, now forced to flee once again.
This is the area they said was safe, south of Gaza. This is the safe area. I've been displaced from one place to another, from the north to the centre of the Gaza Strip, and then here. We're tired. We're tired.
With the fires still burning, survivors scour the remains of their devastated lives. More than 70% of Gaza has now been destroyed. Saad al-Din Abu Zanada fled the fighting in Khan Yunis 3 months ago. He doesn't know if his home is still standing. Now his family's tent is gone too.
I managed to rescue some mattresses and blankets, and I'm searching for the rest. Some are buried under the rubble along with our clothes. This is all I was able to salvage. They forced us to leave, no one remained there. We only took some clothes for the children to dress them, but we couldn't take anything for ourselves.
Earlier this week, Hamas agreed to a 60-day ceasefire in return for freeing 10 living hostages, brokered by negotiators from Qatar and Egypt. But there's been no formal response from Israel, despite these being terms it previously agreed to.
Every day they say there is a truce, but they're all liars. There is no truce. They're playing with our nerves. We don't believe a single word anymore. And we don't even follow the news because I know they are all liars.
The Israeli army has called up 60,000 reservists in preparation for the new offensive. 20,000 more will have their active duty extended, despite a weariness inside Israel and growing dissent within the military. The Israeli Prime Minister is pressing on with his stated aim of eliminating Hamas and taking complete control of Gaza. And with the offensive looming, today, desperation turned to defiance. Dozens marched through Gaza City this morning to demand an end to the war.
The people of Gaza are voicing a rightful demand, the chance to live in safety and peace. The actions of the Israeli occupation forces, demolishing infrastructure and homes, killing thousands of civilians, starving the population, it must come to an end.
Others have simply chosen to leave. Lives are piled onto anything with wheels as families seek shelter amid the impending doom.
All night long there was continuous shelling and artillery fire. Everyone with me is a child, so we fled. We had previously been displaced to Rafah, then to Khan Yunis, then to Nusrat, and then to Gaza City. Now we are leaving Gaza City, waiting for God's mercy to come.
Hopes of a new ceasefire are fading, and amid Gaza's ruins, everyone is now asking the same question: where else can we go? Well, earlier I spoke to retired Brigadier General Amir Avivi. I asked him how Israel plans to evacuate such large numbers of people from Gaza City.
Everybody wants to leave Gaza City, will be allowed to go to the south, to the humanitarian zone, whether they are militants or civilians. So we want to clear as much as possible the Gaza.
Stop you right there, because you say they can move south to the humanitarian zone. You're referring to Al-Mawasi, and the IDF has already bombed Al-Mawasi. People have died in the humanitarian zone that you are now telling people in Gaza City they should move to.
Israel is not operating on the ground in this humanitarian zone, but it's pinpointing very, very accurate attacks specifically on terrorists in these areas. But overall, it's not operating there, and it's making sure that endless amount of humanitarian aid goes into this area.
Forgive me, firstly, because children died on those Israeli attacks on what you call the humanitarian zone in Al-Mawasi, and also you say you flood the area with humanitarian aid. I mean, the evidence on the ground is that there is famine and starvation in Gaza. That does not look like an area that has been flooded with Israeli aid.
All these pictures, all of them turned out to be fake.
General,
so
that
we
is
know there
General,
is a whole campaign
that
revolving around something that doesn't exist.
General,
hunger in Gaza.
It doesn't exist?
Doesn't exist at all.
The UN, several extremely reputable humanitarian organizations,
which are all full of terrorists.
This is baby or day, General. This is a baby. Please, would you look at this baby? This was a baby featured in our program on Channel 4 News. This is not fake. This is baby Mohammed, General. What do you see?
I see a child in care house.
You see a child who is starving, suffering malnutrition?
Frankly,
this is what's happening in Gaza.
I don't like this kind of psychological games, okay? Let's put things as they are. Israel is fighting for its existence.
You're telling the people of Gaza to move. Move or what? What if they don't want to move? What if they stay? What are you going to do to them?
Look, if they stay in an area that is in an intense war zone, of course they're endangering themselves. So the minimum right we can say to them, listen, guys, we are going into Gaza City. In a normal reality, an army wouldn't say to the enemy, you know, this is what's going to do. Britain never, ever told some people to get out of war zones where they fought. We do. We give, before that, an announcement that we are going to fight in this area. We give them a chance to get out to a zone where we are providing food. No army ever in the world provided food to its enemies.
Well, the people are starving, but if a civilian refuses an evacuation order, if the people of Gaza refuse that order, that does not make them combatants.
Yeah, but you know, at the end of the day, if an Israeli soldier will see a civilian, he won't shoot them, okay? Israelis don't shoot civilians. But if you are
that is not the evidence of the war so far.
In an area of fighting, of course you will be in danger.
Or you could do none of this, because 600 former Mossad chiefs, former IDF chiefs, former Shin Bet chiefs, 600 of the most distinguished people in Israel have said that Hamas poses no strategic threat. Israel should stop the fighting now. And Benjamin Netanyahu is ignoring them.
So with all due respect to all these former generals, I represent an organization of 60,000, not 600, 60,000 Israeli commanders, generals, operatives, okay? A much bigger organization. And we all think, all of us, that Israel must achieve its goals of war. It must eradicate Hamas completely.
You talk about bringing the hostages home. There is a deal on the table that the Prime Minister of this country could accept today that would bring 10 of those hostages home. And nobody need be harmed. There could be a 60-day ceasefire right now. Why wouldn't they accept that deal instead of putting their lives in danger?
You know, Israel really thought that after defeating Iran and after taking over like 75% of the Gaza Strip, the terms for a ceasefire of 60 days will be created. And it didn't. I mean, we offered the deal. The deal was agreed by Qatar and Egypt. The deal was agreed by the US and by Israel. And Hamas rejected it. And now...
But it's like we've gone into the upside down here, because Hamas have agreed to the deal, a deal that Israel was prepared to agree to just a few weeks ago. So, in theory, the two sides should be able to meet those hostages, should be able to come home.
So, remember that if you do a partial deal, not only Israel has to give up all the achievements it had until now and retreat.
But Israel agreed to this deal a month ago.
And also remember that it's half of the hostages. What about the other half? When we will see the remaining hostages, we can actually defeat Hamas and bring all the hostages back, not half of them.
Do you not think that going into Gaza with this level of force endangers the lives of those hostages?
So in Gaza City specifically, where we are going to operate, there are very few hostages. We know where they are. We know not to go into the areas where they are. So I don't see why they would be endangered.
Well, they have before, haven't they? Because they've been killed in Israeli airstrikes before, hostages.
We are in a complex situation. We have to balance between the different goals of war. Everybody wants to bring back the hostages, but we also need to defeat Hamas.
General Brigadier Amir Vivi, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Now, more than 80% of those killed by Israeli forces in Gaza are civilians, according to an investigation by The Guardian and the Israeli-Palestinian publication Plus 972. They said the information came from a classified Israeli military database, which has named just 8,900 militant fighters among the dead. Israel dismissed the figures as not correct, while the IDF's latest estimate claims 22,000 terror operatives have been killed. In other developments, the UK has called on the Israeli ambassador to protest against Israel's approval of a major settlement in the occupied West Bank, which would effectively cut the Palestinian territory in two. In a joint statement with 20 other countries, the UK said the move would fuel further violence and instability. At the same time as the military advances, a ceasefire deal, which Hamas officials say they have accepted, is yet to receive a formal response from the Israelis. Mediators from Qatar and Egypt are trying to secure a deal that begins with a 60-day truce and would see the release of nearly half the remaining hostages held in Gaza in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. I'm just going to hand over to Kathy now in London.
Well, I'm joined now by the official spokesperson for Egypt's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Tamim Khalaf. Ambassador, the Brigadier General that you just heard from there with Kieran said that images of starvation, starving children, are fake. I just wanted to get your response to that.
Well, I think it's a textbook definition of living in a state of denial. The entire international community is seeing one thing, but Israelis are seeing something else. International organizations, including the United Nations, the World Food Program, the Office of Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, the World Health Organization, all of the international organizations of the world have put Israel on the spotlight that there is a complete famine in Gaza. Children are indeed starving. And incidentally, I was 48 hours ago, I was actually on the border in Rafah accompanying the Egyptian foreign minister and the prime minister of Palestine in a visit. And there were thousands of trucks that were outside of the border waiting full of humanitarian supplies and medical aid that the Israelis would not allow. And the Rafah border was open, but the Israelis have sieged the other side of the terminal. They occupy the Rafah crossing, and we can't get these essentials inside for the children of Gaza.
And when you think about the takeover of Gaza City that is now underway, what are your fears for the implications of that, the number of civilian casualties, really?
This is a very, very serious escalation, and it is one that will aggravate and exacerbate the already untenable situation in Gaza. This is Israel's occupation. It will entrench Israel's occupation in Gaza. It will deepen the humanitarian crisis, and it will complicate the already existing negotiations for a ceasefire deal. And quite frankly, we question the utility and usefulness of these military incursions. The Israelis know better. They've been in Gaza before in 2005, and they were bogged down in a war of attrition. So we don't understand what exactly the Israelis are doing, and therefore we are categorically against what the Israelis are doing. This is an abhorrent attempt to try to subdue the Palestinian people in Gaza, who have already endured an unspeakable humanitarian tragedy over the course of the past 2 years.
So let's talk about those ceasefire negotiations that you and Qatar have negotiated. Hamas has said that it's accepted the deal that you've put forward. Israel earlier today says that it will begin Gaza ceasefire negotiations. Does that give you any hope?
Look, we have not received so far any official confirmation that Israel is engaged in the ceasefire proposal. Egypt and Qatar, as the mediators, have indeed offered a proposal. It is a good proposal. It is a practical one, and one that can lead to the de-escalation and end of the hostilities. It proposes a 60-day ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. And during these 60 days, we can negotiate in order to have a more durable and sustainable ceasefire at the end of the ceasefire. It will also release, the proposal is to release 10 hostages, Israeli hostages, and 18 bodies of those that have been deceased. And it will also provide the necessary humanitarian relief to the Palestinians in Gaza. We believe it's a practical proposal, it is a reasonable proposal, and this is the moment of truth for Israel. It has to, while the international community is rallying for the state of Israel to support and to accept this proposal, we see on the contrary to the collective will of the international community, we're seeing incursions in Gaza and an entrenchment of Israel's occupation inside Gaza.
And you talked about what you observed on the Rafah crossing. What do you say to those who call on Egypt, as Gaza's neighbour, to do more to put pressure on Israel to allow more aid in, and also to give sanctuary to some of the Palestinians who do want to leave? I mean, many don't want to be displaced. But what do you say to those critics of Egypt?
Kathy, I don't know of a country that has supported the Palestinian people more than my very own country and my own very government. We have stayed shoulder to shoulder with the Palestinian people since 1948, through wars and actually through peace. And we continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Palestinian people. 70% of the humanitarian assistance that went inside Gaza came from Egyptian people. The remaining 30% was from the international community. And when I went to Rafah and I went to actually the warehouse where all of the medical facilities and humanitarian relief stockpiles that were there, it was shocking to see that Israelis were preventing wheelchairs from entering into Gaza. They were preventing ICU beds, intensive care unit beds for children in Gaza. It's quite a disgraceful and an abhorrent thing to see. And quite frankly, we will continue to try to support the Palestinians as much as we can. We were able to provide 1,200 trucks through the Karem Shalom crossing, but that's not enough. The dire humanitarian situation is very serious in Gaza, and we will continue to support the Palestinian people shoulder to shoulder until they get through this.
Ambassador Tamim Khalaf, thank you very much for joining us. Now back to our main story, and the trickle of aid entering Gaza has been far from enough to tackle the overwhelming need. Dr. Victoria Rose is a consultant plastic surgeon who's volunteered repeatedly in Gazan hospitals and spoken graphically about what she's called a man-made famine there. Now she's returned from her latest visit, she and other medics have teamed up with lawyers, including KC Kirsty Brimelow, to gather evidence of potential war crimes by Israel. Dr. Victoria Rose first, what are colleagues in Gaza telling you now about the situation?
So the main thing that we're hearing about, obviously, is the starvation and the number of people dying from malnutrition. What's recently come through is the increase in the numbers of people that we're seeing suffering from a flaccid paralysis, which is thought to be the result of an enterovirus. Now, obviously, most of the people in Gaza, as we said before, have been displaced multiple times, and sanitation and water are now very scarce. Fresh water is very scarce.
And an enterovirus would be diarrhea, vomiting,
diarrhea,
that
vomiting.
Kind of thing.
So it's being spread very wildly in that sort of environment. But what's been happening is it primes the immune system, and then you produce antibodies to attack your own nerves, basically, which starts really with tingling and numbness, but progresses to skeletal muscle paralysis. Now, we do see this in the UK in very small numbers. It's known as Guillain-Barré syndrome. And in Gaza, it has been seen before the war, but probably 1 or 2 cases per year. My colleagues at NASA are saying that they've seen 100 cases in the last 3 months.
Right, so that's really significant.
Yeah,
that's Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, yeah.
And the WHO have just reported that there's been 37 cases in children under 15 since the end of July.
So, Kirsty Brimelow, what can you do with that kind of evidence that you're hearing from? How can you? What's the idea behind this sort of legal attempt to hold Israel to account?
Well, one of the difficulties is that evidence that is put forward in, for example, media interviews seems to be dismissed as propaganda or fake, and we've seen an example of that earlier. And so myself and a team of lawyers, we are taking statements from the doctors who have been in and out of Gaza. They are the witnesses as to what is happening. And they have that professional and independent overview. As to what happens to the statements and the storage of the videos that they have taken, I think there's probably immediate crisis term, which is what we're focusing on now, which is the starvation and what can be done. And some of those decisions have to be taken at a political level. But what is coming through is there's very definite evidence of children who are dying because of malnutrition, children who are dying because of starvation, children who are not healing from shooting, blast injuries because of their starvation, because of what is going on, that they cannot recover from those injuries.
And you think you can use this evidence to do what exactly?
Well, first of all, it can be presented, once we've got the statements, it can be presented in an open forum where Israel has an international legal obligation to ensure that aid it goes to the civilians in Gaza. It is a war crime to use starvation as a weapon of warfare, and that is set out under the Rome Statute. It's also set out under customary international law. The importance of that is because there's always replies from Israel that it's complying with international law. But what does that mean? Because if there's evidence of starvation, then it needs to show that that starvation is not intentional. And its best way to do that is to open up and allow all the aid to go in so that there are no more dead children and dead people from lack of supplies.
So, Victoria Rose, when you hear the Brigadier General on our programme saying that the starvation was fake, or Benjamin Netanyahu saying that there is no starvation, there is no policy of starvation, how do you respond to that from what you and colleagues have seen?
Well, I think it's clear that the people that have been into Gaza and seen what is happening are the people that should be believed. And my colleagues and I have all been into Gaza, and we are all coming out saying the same thing. And so it's evident that there is an issue with starvation. And I think anybody that disputes that is not telling you the truth.
And so when you hear from Victoria Rose and other medics the evidence that you've got in front of you, is it persuasive? Do you feel that as a lawyer you're able to potentially prove that war crimes are taking place?
Of course it's persuasive, because they are approaching this from an independent perspective. That there's nothing for a surgeon to gain in making up the symptoms or the cause of death of the people that they're operating upon, because they remember each one very vividly and are compiling the cases. So it's important to put it down in that form. But another aspect really that's coming out of this is of course there has to be accountability, and there are two open investigations. There's one before the International Court of Justice and one before the International Criminal Court. However, it takes time. And meanwhile, whilst there are debates about genocide and definitions of genocide, there are people daily, civilians daily, who are needlessly dying. And the important thing here is that these are preventable deaths, and this is the information that we are getting from the medics.
Briefly, do you hope to return to Gaza?
Yeah, we would like to return to Gaza, but obviously, entry's been heavily restricted, and we just found out yesterday that COGAT, who are the Coordination for Activities in the Occupied Palestine Territories, have deregulated 3 of the main charities that send international doctors in. So it's increasingly difficult to get in.
Dr. Victoria Rose and Kirsty Brimlow, thank you very much for joining me.